Epigenetics. The branch of genetics devoted to the study of how and why environmental signals can mutate gene expression within the body. The revelations emerging out of epigenetics are already changing the way mainstream science thinks about evolution. While the old paradigm thinking was that our genes come pre-packaged and govern all aspects of our behavior, epigenetics is showing how our interactions with the environment can create lasting changes in our DNA, some of which are imprinted in our offspring for generations. The greatest import of epigenetics is that it demonstrates how interrelated all life is, thus building a greater understanding of the universe as interdependent and holographic. It is through epigenetics that we can see the true power of human attitude and its electromagnetic effect on our DNA. Different frequencies of attitude activate different expressions of genes, even though the sequence of those genes may remain the same. The greatest insight offered by epigenetics is still dawning in the scientific world, the timeless truth that consciousness creates reality. So there you have the key sentence: consciousness creates reality. I imagine it will take perhaps 1,000 years for the mainstream to fully, well, not even fully, begin to grasp this. Consciousness creates reality. Consciousness is entangled with reality. It is, because we have to move beyond this materialistic understanding. You have to realize that everything is entangled. But epigenetics is a wonderful step along the way. It's a branch of genetics, and I don't pretend to understand it other than in a very basic way. But what it's showing is how environmental signals can mutate our DNA. So, there are all kinds of possible environmental signals. There's what happens in our outer life, what happens in our emotional life, what happens in our relationships, what happens in our culture, our community, what happens in the world. All of that is programming us. What is happening celestially through movements of spheres, what is happening to the sun, very much so, and how that is impacting our physical cellular life. All those things are impacting us, their environment. And I'd like to extend this idea of environment to our quantum environment. So it's not just what we can see, it's also the impact of different thoughts on us, the impact of attitudes around us, particularly when we're conditioned in our childhood, but also obviously later in life. The thoughts that you think are part of the wider quantum environment. The feelings that you feel and that you attract, are part of the quantum environment. So all these things are affecting us. And the old paradigm thinking was that our genes were, just set, instead of the realization that actually it's our attitude, that indefinable thing that actually is filtering the quantum field before it reaches our DNA. So it's the way you think, the way you act, the way you behave, the way you feel, the way you respond to others in life that actually is filtering the environmental signal as it then impacts our DNA. So it's not just about being positive, because it's about actually sometimes taking a negative filter inside us and beginning to really understand it and embrace it, and then let it go so that it moves through, because those negative filters that we've learned are aspects of our shadow, they're aspects of our childhood, of our protection, defense mechanisms. And they don't serve us so well in adulthood, they don't serve us that well in childhood, but they do protect us from sometimes difficult circumstances. So some of it is sometimes it's imprinted for generations. So that's also to be thought about, that our ancestral DNA, our ancestral lines, actually also carry weight They carry sometimes heaviness, but sometimes also possibilities. We don't always know who our ancestors were, what kind of lives they lived, um, how they responded, what their attitude was, whether they received great shocks, whether they were spiritual, whether who they were, but they all carry a weight in our DNA collectively, and we are the kind of cresting wave of that ancestral line. So whatever's in there has to be processed. All the good can be put to our advantage, and all the negative has to be transmuted. As it says here, that the greatest import of epigenetics is it demonstrates how interrelated all life is, thus building this understanding of the universe as interdependent and holographic, because everything is impacting on everything at all levels. So we're not these things that stop at the boundary of our body. We are fluid and flexible and ever changing, in an electromagnetic flux, a field that we live in, this rippling field, and we are programming that field. And that field is holographic in the sense that there is deep underlying pattern to it, and that pattern is replicated at all levels in creation, if you can only see that. I mean, that's something we have to feel. And when you feel that pattern, you have trust. That's what we call trust. Trust is feeling and knowing and remembering the pattern of life. That there is a flow, there is a reason, there is a purpose, there is to everything. There is a perfection to everything. So epigenetics is a great step that modern man is taking to understand our entanglement with everything else. The interrelationships between us and the environment. The different frequencies of attitude activate different expressions of genes, even though the sequence of the genes may remain the same. That's kind of interesting idea. The sequences in our DNA are kind of protein building sequence and stuff that makes us who we are, stuff that makes your eyes blue, makes you grow at certain paces, and all of that. But the whole nature of the revelation of Gene Keys is that this possibility that within all that are embedded higher frequencies, so the genes could look the same, but the expression of the genes is different. So it comes out it's interpreted in a different way. There are these frequency bands embedded in us that are invisible, and our attitude governs whether we live out a shadow frequency, because we have opinionated thinking, for example, and then our mind is always trapping us. If it's a very materialistic thought pattern, for example, it's always going to trap us in an opinionated thinking, and then close down our mind to other possibilities, to the possibilities of things we can't see or that science hasn't yet developed or understood. So the openness is what's so important. Open mind, open heart, open being. All the great spiritual principles. So the timeless truth that consciousness creates reality. It'll be an interesting, millennium ahead of us as we see, where science goes and all those great minds out there. If they can break free from the materialistic paradigms and begin to glimpse this quantum world in which we live, then I think science and life is going to become very exciting, because we're going to start to understand that we have a much greater power than we ever realized. Our minds are incredibly powerful. So, and we can begin to change our environment and change it for the better.